There are 4 parts to the test. Part 1. You will hear a journalist called Peter Smith talking about a trip he made to the Arctic seas around the North Pole. For questions 1 to 8, complete the sentences.
I can't pinpoint the exact moment when I made the decision to embark on my sailing expedition to the North Pole. The previous summer I'd come across a book entitled Far Horizons, which suggested that a voyage of this kind was a unique experience, and everyone should try it once. So, I put on 3 layers of clothing and set off in my boat in July with a small crew to sail to the Arctic seas near the North Pole. I felt it was time I went in search of adventure. I've been told that sailing there shouldn't present any more problems than you'd expect sailing round the seas in the north of Britain. Well, initially that was true, but there were differences. The most noticeable is that up there in the Arctic seas, you have the impression of being alone. So, if anything breaks down or goes wrong, for example, one of our large front cabin windows shattered in the gale we encountered on our first night, you have to have all the tools you need. We would have been very cold and wet if we hadn't had the means to make a solid repair. The second big difference is the temperature. In the winter in those seas, things can get down to -50 degrees. In the summer it's much warmer and the surface seawater is always above freezing, but the air temperature never rises much above 10 degrees. This all means 2 things. The first is that the cabin of your boat must have effective heating. The second is that you must have proper outdoor clothing. Another difference is that you meet some things that aren't found on a normal sailing trip. Not surprisingly, we met gigantic lumps of ice which had broken off icebergs, and occasionally we saw enormous tree trunks on the sea. We really weren't sure what they were doing there. They do say that in those seas you can even spot polar bears, which are reported to be very dangerous if disturbed. Unfortunately, we weren't able to catch sight of one, although we did see whales. For all this effort, though, you're rewarded with a trip to a true wilderness, which can be reached in your very own boat. More than 250,000 tourists visit this area each year, but in order to protect the environment, and because of the difficulty in getting there, most of the tourism takes the form of package tours. These have only limited access to certain unrestricted areas. But in your own boat, you can have the whole area to yourself.
That is the end of Part 1. Part 2. You'll hear the head teacher of a school talking to a group of parents about an international student exchange program. For questions 9 to 16, complete the sentences.
Good evening. I'd like to welcome all those parents whose children have just started at the school. The purpose of this meeting is to give you information about the international exchange programme known as Open Homes, which the school runs. For 1 week a year, pupils are invited to stay with a family abroad and attend school with a child the same age. A return visit is then arranged 6 months later, when our pupils and their families open their homes and become the hosts. In general, children aged 13 to 15 years old, but no younger, seem to get something out of this trip. Now, I realise that your own children will only be 11 or at most 12 this year, but we feel that it's important to begin by making the links that will make a future exchange more successful. So we want children to make a pen friend of their prospective overseas partners a year or so before the visit. By taking part in this scheme, they will already know someone in, and a lot about, their destination before they leave. We've established links with schools in various countries. In the past, European exchanges have been the most popular, especially amongst children keen to practice their languages. But this is not the only aim of the programme, so those more interested in other subjects should not be put off. One year we organised a trip to Holland which was very successful, although none of the children were studying Dutch. Our most regular destination, however, is France, with Germany coming a close second, although we are in touch with a school in Poland which is very keen to take part, as is a school in Canada. Although most children love the experience, we must be prepared for some difficulties. This may be the child's first trip abroad, leading to feelings of homesickness as well as loneliness. a week can seem a long time when you feel lonely or you're missing home. So each group of pupils is accompanied by a professional group leader, which means there's always someone with training on the spot to solve any difficulties, which is a relief for both parents and host families, as you can imagine. There is variety built in the week, and this definitely helps. For example, children attend lessons together in the morning and then visit a local place of interest in the afternoon. These trips can be fun as well as educationally valuable, and parents are invited to come along too. In the past, we've managed to combine the pure entertainment of places like theme parks with the learning opportunities provided by wildlife parks, museums, etc. And surprisingly, it's actually the wildlife rather than the theme parks which prove the most popular time and time again. So, I hope I've given you some insight.
That's the end of Part 2. Part 3. You will hear part of an interview with Norman Cowley, a well-known novelist and biographer. For questions 17 to 23, choose the correct answer A, B, C or D.
With us today to discuss his career, we have Norman Cowley, renowned novelist and biographer. So let's start at the beginning, Norman. You did say some years ago that you began high on the mountain only to go down sharply while others were passing you on the way up. Do you think now, when you look back at your first novel, that it had anything that you were not able to recapture later?
You can't write a worthwhile book, or you can't continue to be a reasonable writer if you start recapturing what you've done earlier. So, there are all sorts of positive things in my first book that I'll never achieve again. The immediacy of it, the easiness of the dialogue, the kind of stylistic elegance that comes not trying to be too sophisticated. But on the other hand, I wouldn't want to repeat it.
Now, after the tremendous success of that first novel, your second one was pretty much damned by the critics.
Oh, more than damned. It was torn apart.
Well, now, that must have hurt, probably more than anything subsequently.
It was shocking because, and you know this is going to sound silly, but I couldn't believe the intensity of the attack on it. I remember one awful review by a long-standing, distinguished critic who was uncharacteristically attempting to be witty, I suspect. He wrote that the book was paceless, tasteless, graceless. Now, it certainly had its faults, but it had pace. It had its own kind of taste, in tune with the youth culture of the time, and I like to think it had some grace. It was almost as if the reviewer had deliberately set out to pick the few good things he could find in the book and wreck them too. It was a demolition job.
But did this rejection push you in a different direction?
It left me very confused. I thought maybe I should give up and become something else, but I didn't know what. So I wandered around and finally started thinking about the next book, The Green Wood. Of course, you get good reviews too, which give you hope, and the bad ones toughen you. Finally, after many, many years, you realize that it's part of it. In a way, it's a pruning process. It cuts down all but the people who are really driven to be writers. So there are far more people who write 2 novels than 6 or 7.
After a while, people began to see some autobiographical content in your fiction. Was that fair?
It was half fair. You don't ever put someone into a book completely. You don't dare, because if you do, you've got a dull character. The point is that if you put people that you know very well, like your wife or children, into a book, they're real for you already, so you don't have to create them. So they say a few things that they say every day, and they're real for you, but not for anyone else. It's better if you change them. I love taking people and transforming them to a degree by, say, putting them in an occupation they don't have, and so on.
And what do you think about some of the novels written today with their extremely violent plots?
I don't care what characters do in a novel. I'm willing to read about the worst human monster, provided the novelist can make that person come alive. A novel should enable you to learn more about the depths of human nature. Some of today's violent novels don't do that. There's no inner voyage. The writing's descriptive, but not revealing. Probably there's such a thing as going too far, but only if you don't fulfill the prescription. You can go as far as you want, but your imagination has to be equal to it.
So the novel is still mainly a kind of psychological journey?
Well, it can be many things, a riddle, a game, or a wonderful revolution of language. I would hate to say novels have to be one thing, but the key is that they should illuminate human experience in a dramatic way. Otherwise, why read them? You're going to get a better, swiftly paced modern narrative on the average TV show.
Now, in your selection of subjects for biographical treatment, is there one aspect of all these people which attracted you?
Well, yes, I feel that I'm in a position to write biographies of people who are well known, not necessarily because I'm as large a celebrity as they are, although I do think I have more insight into them than the average good, worthy biographer. They approach from the outside and don't understand the incredible confusion of identities that grows when you come to celebrity from simpler beginnings. That's what draws me to these people. Also, you have the great advantage of knowing what happened. When you're a novelist, you panic about what to do next. You could wreck the book if you go the wrong way.
Now, let's turn to your latest novel, which has already...
That's the end of part 3. Now look at the fourth and last part of the test. Part 4 consists of 2 tasks. You will hear 5 short extracts in which different people are talking about the means of escape they use to cope with the demands of their working lives. Look at task 1. For questions 24 to 28, match the extracts with what each speaker finds demanding about their work, listed A to H. Now look at task 2. For questions 29 to 33, match the extracts with what attracts the speakers to their different means of escape, listed A to H. Speaker 1.
I enjoy speed in every walk of life. Perhaps it's my weakness, but I feel that time's so precious you mustn't waste it. That's why my car's my means of escape. I've always loved the sense of danger when driving fast cars, and if I didn't own the transport company I work in, I'd probably be a racing driver. The trouble is that because of the company's high profile, I'm often recognised. Now that's where the car comes in. I rarely take passengers or use it for any practical purpose. I just get in it and drive for hours. When I'm old and grey, I don't want to have any regrets. I don't want to think I didn't take advantage of the opportunities life offered me.
Speaker 2.
The garden was a wilderness when we moved into our present house. As a youngster, I'd always wanted a treehouse in the garden, and now it seems that I've built the deluxe version. It stands on stilts in the corner of the garden where nothing would grow. It even has a balcony and a light inside it. I don't know what I'd do if I didn't have it to escape to. You see, being an opera singer is an athletic pursuit, and you have to train like an athlete for it. Once I get on stage, I'm swept along by the sheer feeling of commitment I have to what I do. You have to have access to grand passions to be able to live the part, which is great, but the need to switch off is even greater.
Speaker 3.
I've been going to watch rugby football for over 25 years now. The club is totally amateur. There are no spectator stands and it's absolutely freezing in winter. The crowds vary between 200 and 300 though, depending on the fixture. But as soon as I walk into the ground, I completely switch off from the day-to-day pressure of the bank, where I work as managing director, even if the game gets a bit lively sometimes. You see, I believe team games give you a better insight into what life is all about, that you have to take the knocks as well as give them, and that you can achieve more by working together than you can as an individual.
Speaker 4.
My means of escape isn't a solitary place. It's the study area part of our first-floor living room. And with 5-year-old twins and 4 older children, it's what you might call a place with quite a lot of hubbub. I sit here at the end of a long day and drink tea. Everyone near and dear to me comes in and out and talks about what they've been doing. My days are always busy because I work as a consultant in a hospital, and every Tuesday I have a special clinic in the evenings, so I'm absolutely worn out most of the time. It's being at home that enables me to recharge my batteries.
Speaker 5.
There's a ranch in the US, which I love going to. You ride in the morning, in groups, according to your ability, and in the afternoons there are lawn games, or whatever. You live in small cabins, which are comfortable rather than luxurious, and you eat good, plain food. It's so different from being a chief executive of an oil company. I find it really relaxing. You see, when the company was originally founded in 1886, it took 4 months to get a message from the Far East. Now people are checking the stock market every 2 seconds and asking what you're going to do about so-and-so. Soon everything will be screened directly into your brain. You'll close your eyes and see the price of shares.
That's the end of part 4. That is the end of the test.